Revolution Evolution!
The African American Civil Rights Movement.
I'm Annie, learner at New Tech High at Coppell. One of the subtopics I will be covering is the introduction into the Civil Rights Movement. The Civil Rights Movement was a major historical event that had a huge impact on the future of America. It changed how African Americans lived all over the United States, starting in the 1950s and 1960s. The court ruling of Brown v. Board of Education in 1954, the leadership of Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks, and the strides led by President John F. Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson all contributed to the end of racial discrimination. Even though society today still has racial issues, Parks, King, Kennedy, Johnson, and many others have helped us get to where we are today.
I'm Sydney, Civil Rights Movement researcher. One of the subtopics I'll be covering is the causes and the effects of the Civil Rights Movement. There are many causes of the Civil Rights Movement. One of the best known was Rosa Parks' refusal to give up her seat on a bus to a white person. However, many of the causes go back farther in its history to the beginning of civilization. As early as the 18th century BC Babylonians, slavery has been taking place. Slaves around the world were not allowed to own property, and they had no basic rights. They belonged to their masters. The most well-known slave trading took place during the 1700s. This slave trade, called triangular trade, consisted of slave trading in England, the United States, and Africa. English ships would collect Africans and take them to the United States to be sold into slavery. During the middle 1800s, the issue of slavery became so violent that the Civil War took place. After the war, President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed all slaves in the United States. However, there's still much racial tension, particularly in the South. Throughout the early 1900s, many Southerners still believed in racial separation between white and African American people. The Jim Crow laws were passed during the early 1900s. These laws portrayed a separate but equal vision by Congress. It is necessary that this principle be applied in every relation of Southern life. God Almighty drew the color line, and it cannot be obliterated. The Negro must stay on his side, and the white man must stay on his side. And the sooner both races recognize this fact and accept it, the better it will be for both. Said by the Richmond Times. According to this quote, blacks and whites will have equal opportunities and rights. This, however, was not true. African American people were given less school money and poor bathroom facilities, among other things. The Jim Crow laws, along with Rosa Parks' act of defiance and the African American struggle for equal rights, sparked the Civil Rights Movement. There are many effects of the Civil Rights Movement, the most obvious being the end to racial segregation. After the movement, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said in hindsight, "Yes, if you want to say that I was a drum major, say that I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for righteousness. And all the other shallow things will not matter." There were other effects of the Civil Rights Movement as well. The African American Civil Rights Movement paved the way for other civil rights movements to take place, such as women's suffrage. Mahatma Gandhi once said, "Women's empowerment is intertwined with respect for human rights." The African American Civil Rights Movement showed Americans that if African Americans can have equal rights as white men, then so can women.
I'm Alex, Global Issues course attendee. One of the subtopics I will be covering is Rosa Parks' impact on the Civil Rights Movement. On December 1st, 1955, in Montgomery, Alabama, an African-American woman by the name of Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white passenger when he told her to get up and sit in the colored section of the bus. Rosa was a civil rights activist of the NAACP. She was arrested for refusing to give up her seat on the bus. The protest lasted a year and marked the start of the protests of Martin Luther King Jr. She was soon after fired from her job and unable to find work. She remained active in the civil rights movement even though no one would employ her. She was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal in 1999, the highest honor. Most people say that her lone act was the one that started the whole movement.
I'm Sydney, Civil Rights Movement researcher. One of the subtopics I'll be covering is Martin Luther King Jr.'s impact on the Civil Rights Movement. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s impact on the Civil Rights Movement was incredible. His ability to move crowds with words was nothing short of amazing. King was born January 15, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia. He was born into a middle-class family, and both of his parents were pastors. Because Martin grew up in the South, he faced many prejudices from a very young age. It was not until age 15 that he witnessed the North's peaceful and friendly interaction between African Americans and white people. King worked that summer on a tobacco farm, and he saw both races go to the same restaurants, grocery stores, and churches. The two races were friendly to one another, and there is very little racial discrimination. He said in a letter to his parents, "I never thought that a person of my race could eat anywhere." Martin's, or Michael as he was called as a young child, hate for prejudice in the United States grew even stronger. As King grew older, he began to take an active role in the civil rights movement. One of his first acts, which took place while he was a pastor of a church in Montgomery, Alabama, was to organize a black bus boycott. King was arrested and found guilty for trying to destroy the bus business, but he appealed and was released. The bus boycott put King in the national spotlight and helped make him an icon of the civil rights movement. King's most famous speech came on August 28, 1968, from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. In his speech, King brought up the inequality of the different races in the United States. He urged the nation to come together and create a nation where everyone had equal rights and opportunities. In his speech, King said, "I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed for all the people." These words are known across the world, and they remind everyone of King's historic speech and his dedication to the civil rights movement. On April 4, 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot on a balcony of his hotel room in Memphis, Tennessee. While he may not be alive, King's work and dedication to the civil rights movement will never be forgotten.
I'm Marissa, documentary maker and producer. One of the subtopics I will be covering is the conclusion to the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement was a very important turning point in history. It permanently changed the way people look at each other. It changed laws, rules, government, and people. The civil rights movement was a time when people of different races and social classes fought to end racial discrimination against African Americans and restoring suffrage in southern states. African American people were treated very badly. They were forced to sit in reserved sections in buses, theaters, restrooms, and even forced to go to different schools, all because of the color of their skin. They were required to pay more to dine at restaurants. This angered the humble people of the North and the African Americans who were mistreated. So they decided to let their voices be heard and take action. The reform lasted from 1955 to 1968. The civil rights movement was also about fundamental issues of freedom, respect, dignity, and economic and social equality. Groups that fought to end this discrimination consist of NAACP, SNCC, COR, and CLCS. These groups formed sparked a flame in young people's hearts to stand up to take action. Many famous people emerged from this time period. Rosa Parks is one of the most famous, along with Martin Luther King Jr. Others consist of Malcolm X, Dred Scott, and John Brown. Not only did the civil rights movement affect America, it also impacted the other parts of the world. In 1963, a young black pastor by the name of Paul Stevenson led a bus boycott similar to and inspired by one led by Rosa Parks. Stevenson also led the campaign "No Blacks, No Irish, No Dogs" outside pubs. He once walked into a white bar and refused to leave until he was served a drink. Stevenson helped show England that African Americans were useful to England too, and that they deserved equal rights. It is now illegal to racially discriminate against any person in England. Without the American Civil Rights Movement, the world would be very different than it is today. All watchers, please take a minute to reflect on what you have learned and how it has personally affected you, your family, friends, and thank all those who were involved in the Civil Rights Movement who made America the way it is today.